Welcome to Break the Cycle with Bethany Dotson, the podcast for high achieving professional women who struggle with codependency, attracting emotionally unavailable partners, and who repeat dysfunctional patterns in love. I'm your host, Bethany Dotson, and if you want to learn more about how to break your cycle in love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and be the first to know when a new episode drops. I'll see you inside. I want to speak about why you might have fallen for someone in your dating journey worse than your ex. And I want to speak about this because it's a really important pattern that I see. It's an important topic. And you may have gotten out of a long term relationship or a marriage, you've gotten a divorce, and then you do all the right things, you take time off to soul search, you take time off to heal, you get into therapy again, you analyze what happened again, you analyze your childhood again, you connect the dots again, you binge everything narcissistic abuse, narcissism related. You do all the right things, right? And then lo and behold, you finally feel ready to date again. And you go out, you have a few duds, and then you finally meet someone that you have chemistry with only to find yourself a few months or sadly even years later in the same scenario, but the scenario is often much worse, meaning you thought this person was your soulmate, you were even more vulnerable, you never shared parts of yourself that you'd ever shared with him before. You had so much chemistry. He was so sweet. He was like a knight in shining armor in the beginning. How could this be happening again? I want to talk about why that happened and why the things that you did to fix yourself were not all the way the solution. Were not full working or did not, it may have helped you feel better. You were probably really down in the dumps right after your relationship. You gained a little bit of momentum. But why the things you tried didn't fully get you all the way to the finish line and why you still wound up in another toxic, unfulfilling, unhealthy relationship. And I speak about this because many people that I talk to and many people that I work with also found themselves in this predicament, and I personally found myself in this predicament. So it can be extremely disheartening to find yourself repeating the pattern once again, even though you really self-aware and you're doing all the right things to try and fix it. The number one reason why this continues to happen is because of your subconscious beliefs and also more than likely your unhealed trauma. And I want to talk about these two things are very intricately linked together. So if you grew up in a childhood environment where a parent was unavailable, a parent was abusive, a parent was narcissistic or emotionally negligent, you took on, and you cannot help it, from the ages of 2 to 7, research and neuroscience shows that we are all in what are called theta brainwaves. Theta brainwaves are the same type of brainwaves you have when you plop down on your couch and you zone out to Netflix. Or you come home from work and you turn on the TV mindlessly and you've got all this noise going in the background. It's programming, right? And so when you're at 2 to 7, you have an unhealthy childhood, you take this programming of what you witness in your environment, what you feel and experience in your environment. And because you don't have the faculties developed yet in your psychology and in your brain and your body to filter what's your responsibility and what is not your responsibility, you take on that programming to be true. And your subconscious beliefs get anchored the more you go through your life. So the more you get into intimate relationships and you find that you're repeating the pattern, the more you get reinforcement. I was just speaking with someone earlier today. If you have a subconscious belief that I'm not enough or I'm unworthy or I'm unlovable or something's wrong with me, and I would say 100% of the women that I work with have this psychology when they first began working with me together. I'm not enough. Something's wrong with me. And it doesn't matter how much you talk about it. It does not matter how much you talk about it. It does not matter where you move. It does not matter what job title you have. It does not matter, what kind of car you drive, how much money is in your bank account. Doesn't matter where you go in the world. If you have subconscious programming and unhealed trauma will cause you to have some negative subconscious programming 99.9% of the time, you will unconsciously be a match for this is you will unconsciously be a match for someone who shares similar subconscious programming as you, and you will be a match. And so many people tell me I've talked about it. I've talked about it. I've spent so much time in therapy. I understand I had an abusive father. I keep getting abusive men. I know this is why it happens, but it keeps happening. And the reason why it keeps happening is because talking about it does not heal subconscious programming. It doesn't, because you're only using 5% of your logical, executive functioning, prefrontal cortex portion of your brain to logically understand. You logically understand narcissism when you read about it in a blog article or when you listen about it in a YouTube video, or it's really prominent right now because of the Gabby Petito case. Emotional abuse is in the forefront, front and center. So you can logically understand it, but it doesn't change anything in your subconscious programming. Your subconscious is 96% of the outcomes that you receive in life, financially, intimate relationship wise, in your career. And so a lot of times I find women who have the subconscious belief of I'm not enough or something's wrong with me. And they got that messaging early in childhood. And then they continue to get that messaging and that proof and that evidence in their toxic adult relationships, tend to be overachievers because they've developed the model their model of the world is that, okay, so in order for me to feel enough, I have to work really hard. And research shows that women who work really hard and have this programming are often a perfect match for partners with manipulative tendencies or emotionally abusive partners, sociopathic partners, psychopathic partners, narcissistic partners, because those types of personalities, those types of partners with that personality disorder will recognize a hard worker and someone who puts in more than her fair share of work, and someone who takes so much responsibility and overly takes responsibility. Those are that's like a buffet breakfast for someone who's emotionally unavailable, someone who's emotionally abusive. They recognize those signs. And because that's your subconscious programming, you are going to be a match for someone who is a fit for that. And you will be a match for that because you're unconsciously seeking scenarios in your life where you can't quite get ahead. You can't quite get ahead. I'm sure there's like a Greek mythology example that I can use here, but it's like trying so hard and you keep getting the same results. And it's like Groundhog's Day. In the definition of insanity is you're doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, right? And I speak to so many women who get 40, 50, 60, 70 years into their life. And this has been the pattern. This has been the theme. And it's so challenging to break because by that point in their life, they have so many points of reference for why something is wrong with them. They've had 4 or 5 failed relationships. The relationships keep getting worse and worse because in spite of all of the things that they're doing to work really hard on themselves and fix themselves and talk about it and go to conferences and do self-help and read self-help books and spend decades in therapy, they they get so many points of reference for why something is wrong with them. And it can be really challenging to break free from that pattern. I'll talk about what needs to happen to break free from that pattern in a second. But the biggest reason why it gets worse is because you are not changing your subconscious beliefs. You're gathering information, but you're not truly shifting those core, primitive, deeply held beliefs. And why aren't you? What's the holdup here? So a lot of people falsely believe that you need to gather a lot of information and talk about it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It gets you a little bit down the playing field. But when you have unhealed trauma, you are usually, when you spent many years or a long period of time walking on eggshells in a narcissistic or toxic relationship, you become habituated to living in fight or flight, to living in survival mode. And I see so many people who they get out of a toxic relationship and then they fill every single free moment in their lives with busy work, with busyness. And this is a trauma response. It just simply means that you are not comfortable feeling relaxed. It doesn't feel safe to relax, just like it didn't feel safe to relax when you were in a toxic relationship. You carry that same template forward with you, even though you've left the toxic relationship in the rearview mirror. At least physically, you're probably still reliving it emotionally and mentally in your mind and in your body. So when you're living in survival mode, your body becomes addicted to stress chemicals, to stress hormones. And just like if you have negative subconscious programming that says something's wrong with me, you will unconsciously seek out relationships and scenarios and work relationships that are going to prove that to be true to you. When your body is really comfortable living in fight or flight, you're also going to unconsciously seek out scenarios that are going to give your body the opportunity to feel all worked up. And it becomes addictive. We all know that toxic relationships are usually very addicting. So your body gets addicted to living in survival mode, walking on eggshells, feeling exhausted, feeling depleted, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like you're never getting ahead. And so when you're living like that in survival mode because of past trauma, it is not possible to reprogram your subconscious beliefs because your body is still on guard. And you have to be in a consistent, relaxed state of being, not doing, on a daily basis in order for your brain to receive, your subconscious mind to receive new programming. When I work with my clients, we do subconscious reprogramming work early in the morning and late in the evening because these are the times of the day when the veil to your subconscious mind is the thinnest. If you have a lot of anxiety, if you're living in fight or flight, if you're feeling exhausted all the time, the veil to your subconscious mind becomes thicker. It becomes more challenging for new belief systems to get back in there and to program and to get anchored as the new programming because there's too much. It doesn't feel safe for your body to fully relax. So that's why those are the two main reasons: unhealed complex trauma or CPTSD and un- unhealed limiting subconscious beliefs. This is why you will continue to find yourself, even though you've done all the right things according to conventional wisdom to fix yourself and to arm yourself against it happening again. This is why the pattern gets worse. The last and final reason this pattern often gets worse isn't because you're cursed. It's not because something's wrong with you. It's not because you're not enough, right? Everything is right with you. And you are enough. Ultimately, you weren't born into this world immediately not enough, right? You were born into this world as pure loving awareness and intelligence. But the journey that we all go through in our lifetime is learning to get back to that, learning to remember that, learning to remember who we really are. And this is what I help my clients do when they've forgotten, long ago forgotten. So the other main reason that this happened is because my belief is that it's life's way of giving you an even greater wake up call. Usually, when I work with someone, they have spent their entire life. I work mostly with midlife women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They've spent their entire life in this pattern. And they thought their ex, their most recent ex, was the one, in spite of all of the experience they've had on this world in their earthly body, and in spite of all of the work that they've done on themselves. And it was worse. And it's usually when things get really bad that people are finally ready to change. This is what we call threshold in coaching. You have to be at a point. It's also what people call in addiction recovery rock bottom. Things have to get pretty bad in order for someone to finally change. Things have to get pretty bad, usually, in an abusive marriage or an abusive relationship for someone to finally leave. And even then, here's the sticking point. Even then, when things hit rock bottom, many people will spend years living in the rearview mirror, questioning themselves, doubting themselves, wondering, was it me? Did I cause this? Was it my fault? And the reason we have a question submitted on this topic, the reason that you find yourself living in the rearview mirror and unable to move forward is that when you undergo a traumatic event, whether it's a one time event or whether it's a prolonged trauma in a relationship, your body takes a snapshot of that environment, right? Your body takes a snapshot and it's someone leaves a thumbprint on your heart, someone leaves a thumbprint in your brain of that. It's like a photograph. Your brain and your body take a photograph of that experience. And your neural pathways in your brain get mapped a certain way that because of that imprint, because of that conditioning. And even when you leave the relationship, your brain and your body want to keep reliving that imprint because that imprint was so strong. We make memories based on strong emotion. And when you're in a toxic relationship, you're feeling a lot of strong emotion. And so it's very difficult to break that moving forward. And a lot of times people unfortunately feel more comfortable. And I mentioned this last week in my previous live, feel more comfortable with a story of what their ex did to them. That becomes their identity. That victim story becomes who they are. It shapes their personality. And unfortunately, a lot of people get many years into their life, even years after they've left the marriage or the relationship, and they're still talking about what their ex did to them. This is partially because their brain and their body really took a snapshot of those traumatic events, and they're just constantly unconsciously reliving that over and over again. And because it feels actually more comfortable just to keep talking about it because that's the known. And when we begin to break up, no pun intended, with a pattern of settling in relationship and break up with feeling like a failure and break up with feeling unsuccessful and break up with our fears of what if I meet someone great and I'm rejected or abandoned? Or what if I meet someone great and then he finds out something terrible about me and he leaves? When we break up with all of those things that are keeping us stuck and move into the unknown, that is actually more terrifying for many women. And that the fear of the unknown is what keeps many people stuck, not just in pursuing love, but in pursuing their dreams, period. So we have a submitted question today that says, I've thought about writing out all the horrible things he did to me, her ex, throughout our relationship, as a reminder that his assertion that it was my fault is not true. However, I haven't brought myself to do that. Why is that? And I think to myself that even remembering those moments should make me realize I didn't deserve to be treated that way no matter what. So why do I still have moments where I believe the failure of our relationship was my fault? So I'll answer this question first. So why do I still have moments where I believe the failure of our relationship was my fault? Partially, this is going back to what I said earlier. When we have a traumatic event or a big loss or a big upset in our life, our brain and our body, it's like we get frozen in time. There was a quote somewhere recently that said, I'm paraphrasing, but the your relationship patterns are similar to the original time you were wounded when you were a child, right? That's the level of your growth, right? Whatever age you were when you were wounded as a child is going to show up in your relationship pattern. So, partially why it's so difficult for you to, why do I still have moments where I believe why it's so difficult, why you're having a struggle there is partially because your brain and your body are still like, and then also when you exit a toxic relationship, there's a really powerful thing called cognitive dissonance. You had really good times and then you had really terrible times. And it's human behavior, human nature to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And so when you're moving through grief from the loss, even of a toxic relationship, and you do need to grieve even a toxic relationship because there was a part of you that loved this person, you need to allow yourself, you need to recognize that part of you will want to minimize the destruction, the level of toxicity, and remember the good times. And this is what it can be a slippery slope for people. This is why so many people go back to a toxic relationship because they minimize what really happened. This is what keeps so many people in a toxic relationship and stops them from leaving because they minimize the abuse. And this is an ingrained behavioral mechanism, the human preservation method, right? We don't want to feel pain. We want to seek pleasure at all costs. It's like our caveman brain is still operating. Seek shelter, avoid the dinosaur, but we're more evolved than that. So one of the other reasons why do I still have moments where I believe the failure was my fault? Possibly because you're maybe minimizing some of the damage, also because of the cognitive dissonance and because the relationship, I presume, caused you to question your sanity and caused you to question your ability to trust yourself. And I don't know how long your marriage was or how severe the extent of the emotional abuse was, but the environment that you were living in throughout the course of your marriage caused you to doubt yourself, caused you to question, is he really, am I the problem? And because that programming is alive and well in you, it will still be there long after you leave that relationship. The other reason, another possible contributor to why that's happening is because you're likely living in fight or flight, your brain, you mentioned in throughout your questioning, I want to know why, I want to know why, I want to know why. Knowing why is good, but it doesn't really heal a long-term pattern. That knowing why is usually coming from a sense of hypervigilance. And when you've lived in walking on eggshells in an abusive marriage in some form or fashion, the part of your brain that's responsible for fight or flight is really overdeveloped. And the part of your brain responsible for tuning inward and trusting yourself is very underdeveloped. So you're questioning why could be partially because you're still a little hyper vigilant. You're really wanting to know why, right? You're really wanting to logically understand. And then because of the abuse, and you're doubting yourself, that could you doubted yourself in the relationship, that programming is still going on even after you've left the relationship. So I want to talk about what it takes to heal a pattern like this if you've made it 40, 50, or 60 years of your life. Most women, and I would say it's sad, but it's understandable, most women want to give up. They They, pardon my French, say, fuck love, F love. I'm never doing that again. F relationships, F men. They move through their life with a chip on their shoulder and they close down even more. They isolate more. I speak to so many women who turn into workaholics. They are not emotionally present for their kids. They watch their kids grow into adulthood and get into toxic relationships and then berate and beat themselves up on the daily with guilt and shame. And they feel terrible. And all of those emotions keep them stuck. It blinds them to their own possibility and they become imprisoned. People say that a toxic relationship is like a prison. Yes, definitely. It's definitely a prison. But the real prison is actually when people leave and they never learn how to fully move forward and they remain trapped in fear. They remain trapped in unhealed trauma and they never allow themselves to truly open their heart. And I mentioned this in a post recently that the number one regret of the dying, and even Bill Gates, Apple CEO, former CEO, billionaire, super, super successful, regretted the number one thing that he regretted in his life was not spending enough time or more time with people that he loved, relationships. Number one regret of the dying is not enough loving relationships. Loneliness in and of itself is the silent killer. We talk about heart disease. Heart disease in women is a silent killer. Cancer can be a silent killer, but the precursor to those things is often emotional distress. High levels of stress in the immune system create physical disease. I was talking with someone recently who had exited a toxic relationship, and because of the emotional destruction she endured, she literally had a heart attack. It was literally costing her life. And so loneliness and living with guilt and living with shame and living with unhealed trauma can be life threatening. It can be life threatening. It can rob you. If it's not physically life threatening, it can rob you of moments that you're never going to get back. It can rob you of joyful memories. It can rob you of being emotionally fully present in your life, and it can rob you of experiencing more love. And so it takes resolve, right? And you have to ask yourself, what is it costing me to avoid my feelings? What is it costing me to remain stuck? What is it costing me to constantly say, dating sucks, men suck? What is it costing me to beat myself up every day and stay chronically busy and feel exhausted and overwhelmed and burnout? What is that costing you? And it's only when the costs are outweighing your payoff. People hide in chronic busyness because they're getting a payoff from it. They don't have to face their feelings. They don't have to feel uncomfortable. That only gets them so far. And it's not a lasting solution. In fact, it usually leads to more destruction later on. This is why people stay in a toxic relationship. They're getting a payoff from it. They're getting great sex. They're getting a good, they're getting good times when it's good. They're getting sometimes a partner that's emotionally available or attuned to them, but then it's downhill the next week. They're getting something out of it. So you have to ask yourself, what is it costing me? What is it costing you to stay isolated? What is it costing you to live your life with your heart closed off? What is it costing you to keep believing that something's wrong with you on the inside? What is it costing you to keep living your life like that? And it's only when those costs begin to outweigh the payoff that you're getting from running from your feelings and from, to put it bluntly, you being emotionally unavailable, that you will finally and truly be ready for change. And that's the level of resolve and what I call the sweet spot that we look for in clients that we work with. They have to have reached a point where the pain and the cost of staying there has gotten so bad that even though the unknown might be scary, what's even scarier is staying stuck for the rest of their life or watching it get worse or sabotaging a healthy partnership. So I've talked about this in other posts before, coaching versus therapy. A lot of time I think therapy is great up until a certain extent. Therapy that can help you understand why. But sometimes, and oftentimes, I see this is true for especially women who've had emotionally abusive relationships. Therapy keeps you stuck in the past. Therapy looks at your past. It looks at the problem. It takes a very logical stance, but it can often keep people stuck. You feel better. You feel emotionally better. You don't feel emotionally bereft, perhaps as you originally were, but it doesn't necessarily give you a plan forward. Coaching doesn't really look so much at your past. It really takes you where you are in your journey. It looks at you on a timeline and meets you where you are and gives you a path forward. Coaching, does everybody need coaching? No, not really. The benefit with coaching is that it helps you shorten the time frame of seeing results. It helps you shorten the period, the timeline of seeing some transformation in your life. I just had someone I worked with recently who made significant changes in just 10 weeks, right? Just 10 weeks. And these are changes that she probably wouldn't have seen on her own for sure in 10 weeks. And if she were to see those changes, it would have probably taken her a lot longer if she were trying to do it herself or throw spaghetti on the wall and try to like pick and choose. And the other benefit of coaching is that it keeps you accountable. Most people know that if they're left up to themselves, they will slide back into apathy or their comfort zone and not take action. And coaching is really about giving you a path forward and accountability and action. You have to have commitment within yourself. I don't want to stay here any longer. You have to recognize that the cost of staying where you are outweighing the pros, the safety, the emotional payoff that you're getting from staying stuck. And once that happens, then you're truly ready for change. And if you are really ready for change, I would highly recommend coaching. And if you've been emotionally abused or you have childhood developmental trauma, I would highly recommend working with someone who is trauma informed because it's a very different animal to work with. So if that's you and you're ready to see some significant changes in your life, I can't promise they will happen all in 10 weeks, like the example that I stated earlier. But if you're really ready to see some significant movements in your journey to healing, if you recognize, okay, I have been stuck way too long. I'm not seeing the results I need. I've been in unhealthy relationships my entire life. And I know in my heart, I don't want to continue that pattern. I know in my heart that I want to have a healthy relationship, number one, with myself, number one, and then with a partner moving forward and learn how to attract an emotionally healthy partner and trust myself 1,000% and regain my confidence and heal my trauma, then that is what we do. That is what I do. This is what I do with my to help them stop the pattern, stop the lifelong pattern. So if that's you, if you're professional, if you're probably an overachiever and you've got your ish together, but when it comes to love, you're highly unsuccessful, then go to bethanydotson.com/talk. We'll have a conversation and see if we can realistically help you where you are in your timeline. Most of the people that we talk to and most of the people that are successful, they've been out of the relationship for a while. We like to say 3 months minimum. Most of our clients have been out longer than that, and they've gotten to a point where I'm trying everything and I'm still stuck. So if that's you and you need a solution and you are ready to face your feelings and feel your feelings to heal them and stop running from them, and you want to plan forward, and go to bethanydotson.com/talk. We'll have a conversation, see if we can help you. We can't help you for whatever reason. If we don't feel like it's 100% a fit, or we're not certain, we might say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z first, or let's start here. We might give you a referral. We might say, we'll give you the next step for you, even if it's not a fit. So bethanydotson.com/talk. You have to be courageous in order to move forward and attract what it is that you want in your life, attract the love that you want. One of my mentors recently said the number one thing that you can do to be successful in anything, love included, is to learn how to navigate fear. And if you're ready to navigate fear and conquer it and fully develop confidence and courage and ultimately a healthy relationship, come talk to us and we'll see if we can help you. I will see you next week. Have a good one. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. A brand new episode drops each week. Be sure to click and subscribe. And remember, healing trauma, codependency, and your lifelong pattern in love does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance and evidence-based methods. And I've helped hundreds of incredible women from all over the country heal betrayal trauma and reclaim their confidence while falling wildly in love with their own lives and attracting healthy relationships. If you like what you heard today and you want to see if you're fit to work with us, go to bethanydotson.com/talk. That's bethanydotson.com/talk and book a call to speak with us today. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and get you crystal clear on 3 things. The real reason you keep attracting dysfunctional relationships, even if you know better or even if you've done tons of work on yourself. What you really want in a relationship, how you want to feel emotionally every single day in your life, and what lifestyle changes you want to make. And then number 3, the exact strategy you need to be using to get there. Again, healing trust issues, codependency, and a lifelong pattern does not happen without expert guidance. We've helped hundreds of women across the country heal complex trauma, codependency, and have the healthiest relationships ever, both with themselves and with others. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk to book your call today. I'll see you on the next episode.